welcome back to Billing Insights, your favorite podcast for medical billing. My name is Taylor.
And I'm Anita.
And we are your co-hosts, and today is another very special day, Modifier Monday.
Woo!
So today we will be going over the modifiers for laterality, which are LT, RT, and 50. And we wanted to start off first by just disclosing that we are still having to work at a not ideal setup. Still have the water situation. If you want more details, you can watch one of the 2 prior videos about credentialing. Anyways, moving on. Let's start out with this article from AAPC, the American Academy of Professional Coders, called Steer Clear of Laterality Modifier Mix-Ups in 5 Simple Steps.
So the main thing to know about modifiers, let's back up just a little bit here. A modifier is 2 letters or 2 numbers, and it just gives more information about a claim. So if you have a CPT code that you're submitting, you want to make sure that you're telling the insurance whether you did it on the right side or left side, if it's even required. And they can get a little complicated as far as who wants what. One insurance wants it one way, another insurance wants it a different way. So it's really important to look at each of your payers and what they're requesting so that you can get it submitted correctly the first time without having to go back in and do a correction. So looking at step number 1, how can we tell if a modifier is needed, Taylor?
So to evaluate whether a modifier is needed, you first need to check the descriptors of the CPT book next to the codes that you're using, and if it is a procedure, check and see if the descriptor uses the word bilateral. If it uses the word bilateral, you probably do not need a laterality modifier because it's already included in the code. You don't need an additional piece of information to specify the rest of the definition. Might not be wording that the best, but if it said unilateral, then the insurance is going to be wondering, well, which side? Was it the left? Was it the right? Did you end up doing both sides? I need a modifier. And then you would add one. So that's the first place that I would kind of check and see, so that you can prevent denials that will then also let you know that you need a modifier.
So let's talk about 69209. That's a CPT code.
Yes, so 69209, I very commonly see in pediatrics. You're also going to see it in family practice, but it is the removal of an impacted ceramen. Just you have too much earwax in your ear, and it's via lavage or what's
Curette.
the other word? Oh, well, curette's the next code. It's lavage, or I just said this. There's a different word for lavage.
Wash?
I don't know, but it's warm irrigation or lavage. There we go. Okay. So, anyways, in the CPT book, in the descriptor, it does say unilateral, and underneath that, it specifies even further if the procedure is bilateral to use modifier 50. So that's a really good example. And then, of course, there is, like Anita was saying, 69210, which is the same thing, removal of impacted ceramen, but via curette, which is just that little metal scrapey guy that scrapes all the earwax out.
So make sure, one thing that Medicare has said is they do not pay for removal of impacted ceramen bilaterally. So if you do put a 50 modifier on it, they will not pay for it. Just one of those little quirks.
Right. So let's go on to step 2, which is verifying the proper application of modifier 50.
A procedure that is not designated as bilateral but can be performed, so you have 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 arms. let's take an injection in shoulder. So you're doing a 20610. If you have both shoulders injected, you would need to apply that 50 modifier to show the insurance that, yes, I did do the injection on both sides. Be careful whenever you're doing that because the number of units is always going to be 1 if you're doing a bilateral procedure. You don't double that to say I did it on 2 sides when you're already using a modifier 50 to show that you did it on 2 sides. So that's just one thing that you do have to watch for.
Right, and that kind of leads into the same thing as step 3, which is assessing if it's appropriate to use LT or RT. You just check and see which side the procedure is on, if it's something that can have sides, if it's okay, so like the lungs has a left side and a right side, but if you were doing something with the nose, well, nostrils have a left and right. That might not be the best example. What doesn't
For
have a left
instance,
and
a
right?
uterus,
Your uterus
or your
your
bladder,
stomach, or one of
your
those
skin.
organs.
Your skin would, I mean, it's over your entire body, but you wouldn't have a modifier 50 whenever you're using something or doing a procedure on the skin.
Right. So the next important thing to check is your payer's bilateral guidelines. It does vary based on insurance. They can ask that you report it in multiple different ways. So some insurances don't want modifier 50 at all. They want your procedure code with an LT modifier, 1 unit, and then the procedure code again with an RT modifier, 1 unit. Some want you to do 1 line with LT and RT, some just want modifier 50. Of course, it's a lot more standard for the governmental payers, but as far as all of the random little private insurances, they can just ask for it to be a certain way, so you always want to check with your payers and see what their guidelines are as far as reporting these modifiers.
One thing to know too, whenever you're an ASC, and we do bill for a lot of ASCs, they use completely different modifiers than the rest of the professional providers. So you would have to go and look up to see how your payers want you to bill for your laterality modifiers if you're an ASC. And the reason for that is there's a list on Medicare's website that of the different modifiers that they use, and bilateral modifier 50 is not an accepted modifier for an ASC. So most payers are going to want you to break it out and put RT on 1 line, LT on the 2nd line, and I can tell you for sure that Medicare wants it that way, but your commercial payers may want it differently. Just pay attention because, again, they use different modifiers than the rest of it, and you could look up on Medicare's website to see what those modifiers are.
Right. So, another helpful resource that we have for you guys in regards to these modifiers is again from Novitas, with their modifier fact sheets. So, it does go over the appropriate use and inappropriate use of modifier 50, like we did last Modifier Monday with 24 versus 79. It is a little bit repetitive at this point in the video, but we can go over when you should not use modifier 50, because the appropriate use would be when it's bilateral. So when should you not use modifier 50?
If your description in your CPT code book already says it's bilateral, you should not use modifier 50 because it's already built in. If you don't have an extra side, so again, bladder, uterus, esophagus, you would use your no modifier on that. If you're looking at your bilateral indicators on your CPT codes, and your bilateral indicator is 0, 2, 3, or 9. Let me repeat that. 0, 2, 3, or 9 on your bilateral indicators, you cannot use a modifier 50. And we will actually be going over bilateral indicators on a different podcast, but look at those and check to see if you can use your modifier 50 or not. Actually, I guess we can go ahead and discuss this a little bit.
Okay. So bilateral surgery indicators, it's a 1-digit number, and they have a little definition next to it, and it's also on this modifier fact sheet. So, 0 indicates that the code is unilateral, and modifier 50 cannot be billed because it's on a procedure where it would never be bilateral. 1, which is not on the list for inappropriate usage. So if you have a 1, you can use it. It just indicates that modifier 50 can be appropriate. 2 indicates a bilateral code. Modifier 50 is not billable because you're not reporting bilateral on top of bilateral. 3 indicates primary radiology codes. Modifier 50 is not billable. And then 9 indicates that the concept does not apply. It's just not applicable in this situation.
Not that I can think of one off the top of my head, but that is an instance that you might possibly not be able to bill. So medically unlikely edits are things that it would be kind of strange to ever see something like that. And I always say whenever we're talking about medically unlikely edits, which are MUE, in our medical billing class, that it might be something like if a person had an amputation and you put down that there were 3 and they only have 2 legs. I mean, that's the normal situation where you might see that. So you wouldn't have a 50 modifier if there were an instance like that. Of course, there's always an instance, a possibility of strange things happening. So if you do have that, you might need to appeal. But it was not something that you would see routinely. So I think one last thing I would like to mention, your pricing for your bilateral indicators or bilateral procedures. If you have, let's say, we're a pain management clinic and we're doing 64493. So that's an injection in the lumbar for the facet for low back pain. Let's say that we did do both sides. We put our modifier 50 on it, showing that the physician did do the injection in the lumbar to both sides of the lower back. Now, what happens whenever we do that is they're going to pay you for both sides, but your pricing on the CPT code has to be high enough to cover both sides being done. Because if you left your pricing at whatever, let's say it's $250 for one side, and you build it out with a modifier 50 saying we did 2 sides, but you left your fee at $250, what's going to happen is that you're not going to get paid for both sides enough money to cover for both sides, even though you told them you did that, because they pay the lower amount of whatever you have submitted on the claim. So $250 is all you're going to get, when really you should possibly maybe even get $500, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And I did just want to throw in there, because we might have moved on past it, modifier 50 can also not be appended to an add-on code.
Yes.
I don't know if we threw it in there, but I'm throwing it in there now. So I think that pretty much sums up everything there is to need to know about modifier 50, LT, and RT. I don't know if we explicitly said that LT means left and RT means right, but it does. I feel like there's something else I was about to say. Oh, I feel like the only questions that would be left at this point are code specific. So if you're unsure and you've used your resources and you checked your CPT book, you can leave code specific questions in the comment section below. I have blah 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 blah. And I need to know, do I use an LT and an RT? drop it in the comments section below. We'd be happy to help you.
Yes, we would.
And we're going to be a lot happier tomorrow when we're back in office. Still construction. I don't know. We might still be recording like this, but at least we'll be able to get into the building. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope this you found to be informational. We really appreciate your support. We are still newer, so we really, really, really hope that you please like, comment, and subscribe, and press that notification bell so you can be notified every time that we upload a new video, so you can stay up to date in this ever-changing industry. We'll see you in the next one. Bye.
Bye.